You're listening to the Okie Geek podcast. I'm Matthew Variappa. Norman comic book store owner and writer Matt Price is bringing back a title you might be familiar with if you played with motorcycle action figures in the 80s. Matt Price remembers reading Team America and seeing the toys as a kid. And now he's bringing the team back. His comic Team America Racing follows a new team of young competitive motocross racers as they compete across the U.S. Originally published by Marvel and owned by Ideal Toys, the brand ended up in the hands of the owner of Comic Shop News, a news publication that Matt Price also writes and edits for. Despite the new publisher not owning the rights to the Marvel comics, Price considers the book a spiritual sequel as updated for a new generation of readers. On this episode of the Okie Geek podcast, Matt Price talks about starting a new Team America book, how the brand ended up at its current publisher, Comic Shop News, and where the series might go next.
For the context of picking up the new book, you probably only need to know, hey, these are young motocross racers that are dynamic and one of the top-rated teams, and they are going across competing with other teams. In the context of this, there starts to be some sabotage and some mystery involved that they get pulled into and have to investigate. So for the purposes of reading the comic, that's all you probably really need to know. There is a much more winding backstory of how these things came to be, based on a toy line from the 80s that itself was based on another toy line from the 70s. So there's a sort of a long and winding road, and if you're nostalgic for any of that stuff, hopefully this will also appeal to you. But for purposes of you're just like, I wonder if I should pick up this comic, it's got great art by Josh Hood, colors by Lorenzo Scaramella. I'm writing it, working with the publishers at CSM Press. But I think you'll hopefully it's a cool comic, variant covers by Howard Chaykin and Javier Saltares. Hopefully you can just appreciate on that level if you've never heard of the brand or the characters before.
So when you were conceptualizing the book, what were the kind of things that you wanted to do with it?
So what we had kind of talked about is I had enjoyed the original property, even though it's hit or miss if you go back and read the comics. But as a kid, I liked just sort of the red, white, and blue costumes and the sort of the mystery and the traveling across the Marvel universe. At that point, we're obviously not set in Marvel, but we tried to recreate that traveling across kind of theme. What I wanted to kind of write about was what's different from, say, 1982 to 2026, and what are some of the changes, especially if we were going with sort of a younger team, which they're in their teens and early 20s. What's different maybe about being at that age now versus what it was like in the 80s? And can we touch on both of those things, maybe with some parents and other older figures having that contrast? So for part of this, I went to various athletic competitions involving, kids today and young adults, and tried to observe kind of how they did interact and what were some of the pieces that maybe did that look any different, or were the things that looked the same? And so I wanted to try to bring that in to what we were doing with Team America. A lot of that's subtextual. You maybe don't necessarily need that to enjoy the story, but that's some of the things I wanted to explore was like, one, we're calling a comic Team America. What does it mean to be it's representing America as a young person? Even if unofficially, because they're not a official U.S. licensed team, that's just their name. But what does that mean? What makes you want to do that? And then who are the people that includes and not includes, and why do we think that? A lot of that is subtextual, but those are some things I wanted to kind of touch on in the book, but through the lens of hopefully having a fast-paced, energetic story.
Yeah. Were there any comics that you were sort of like influenced by for this book?
I mean, I'm sure there are a ton of comics that have influenced me, having read so many. I wouldn't say I looked at it because I don't think you'll necessarily see the same DNA, but part of the things I did kind of consider was like Robert Kirkman updating, say, the Transformers and G.I. Joe, and keep some things the same, make some things different, make some things modern. I kind of wanted to take sort of that playbook a little bit, like let's look at what worked, but not necessarily beholden to, and in this case we certainly couldn't be beholden to specific continuity. But what can we take that still sort of feels like it belongs of a part of this? If somebody's putting all of these on their bookshelf, it feels like it belongs, but is its own thing. And if you're coming in brand new, you can just come in brand new and start here.
Yeah, so this is basically a reboot. There was a prior Marvel line back in the 80s when the toy line was also coming out that ran for about 12 issues. You didn't read any of those, did you, though?
So I read them as a kid.
Yes,
and I
but
did
not
not.
recently.
I didn't. I sort of reread them after I was done. I didn't want to specifically reread them for this because I wanted to do more of a sequel to what was in my head versus a sequel to what actually happened, if that makes sense. Since we couldn't use those characters and concepts specifically anyway, I just sort of used what I had in my head as like, okay, let's do a sequel to what that felt like more than what it actually was. In some ways, I've said it's kind of like Star Trek The Next Generation, although not as closely tied, where it's like, okay, just say there was this concept then, there's this concept now, it's the next generation of it. I did go back and reread some after I was sort of done making this, just to kind of see. And I think that if you liked that one, I think you definitely will find things to like in this one. I think if you didn't like that one, you could definitely find things to like this one. So we tried to make it where you don't need to know anything, but if you do, maybe you'll enjoy some things that we've done.
Yeah. Were you surprised at all by the things that were different after rereading?
I think you just sort of, I guess it's probably a bad explanation, but I don't know if you've ever gone back and say, watch Thundercats. Like the version of Thundercats, the original 80s cartoon in my head is much more complex and layered than what is actually in the show. Because as a kid, you just kind of fill in a lot of the gaps. So I think that's probably true of Team America. I mean, there were multiple writers, multiple artists. They shifted a lot over the 12 issues. And I think I probably didn't, I know I didn't read them in order as a kid. I just kind of picked up issues as I found them or whatever. So I think I'd filled in a lot of things in my head that were maybe more interesting to me. Although, again, they had great people working on it. You know, Frank Miller and Bob Layton do the first cover. Yeah, Mike Vosberg works on it. He did a pinup for us in the new book. So, I mean, I think there's definitely some interesting pieces there. I don't know with the rotating creative teams if they ever had a chance to completely put it together, but I think there were bits to enjoy in it for sure. And I hope that we took what was cool about that and moved it forward.
Yeah, what were those things that you really wanted to like keep the spirit of in the new book?
Sort of the sense of motion, the sort of kinetic energy. One thing that I think they did well, and maybe this was because Shooter was a motorcycle guy a little bit, was like the motorcycles were in the right scale and they never look, they looked realistic enough for what they were doing. Obviously, they had to do some kind of cool things, a little maybe cooler than you could do with actually a street legal bike at that time. But I think the bikes were cool and interacted with the characters well. I think Josh Hood and in our covers, Javier did a good job of like bringing that in to where it feels, hopefully, I mean, I'd love to talk to more people who are deeply involved in that community as we go forward. But I think they did a good job of making all that energy and interaction with the bikes feel plausible while also exciting. I think they, the Team America is chasing down a mystery essentially in their first series. It's a different mystery than what we're doing, but they were investigating unusual happenings that involved a member of their team. And so I kind of brought that forward. It's like, okay, we're still kind of doing that, even though we're doing it totally different.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have much experience with like the original one, but in my head, it always felt a little bit more sort of like a spy sort of like thriller type book.
Yeah. So in the original book, Honcho was, I think, a former CIA agent, and he's involved with S.H.I.E.L.D. in some way, and S.H.I.E.L.D. is dropping in with stuff all through. We obviously didn't have the ability to do that specifically, but we do have, like I said, some mystery. We've got the main team, but then the Highwayman, who's on the Javier Saltares cover, is following the team, investigating some things that are going on. The team kind of gets pulled into what's going on. So we're trying to unravel a little bit of what's going on behind the scenes as well. So it's kind of like they did, but with a little different scope, maybe.
Mm-hmm. What were sort of the things you told like Josh Hood about like visually where you wanted to go with this book?
So hopefully, I mean, we talked a little bit about it. The whole scripts were done before Josh came on board, or Lorenzo, because we had just worked the scripts originally as we were developing the property. But once Josh came on, we did exchange emails and have some conversations that way. And a lot of it, something that he does well already, was let's make this as kinetic as we can. because this is definitely about youth and movement and energy. And so let's see that in the pages. And I think he did a good job of that. I think that's one of the things he does very well anyway. And so I think that's something that was good about bringing Josh on. And then Lorenzo gave it, I think one thing that also separates it from the 80s book is the color palette, where you've got a team that's dressed in red, white, and blue, so that leans you a certain way. I think Lorenzo did a good job of complementing that while at the same time pushing it in sort of a more modern, different direction with the color palette. Whereas the original book definitely looks very 80s, and the coloring is of its time. Not bad, but kind of what you're expecting from a Marvel 1982 book about patriotic motorcycle riders. I think what we did in our book from a color scheme sense is maybe more interesting to a modern audience. And I think if you are a big color nerd, I think you'll get a lot out of what Lorenzo has done with these pages.
Yeah. You said you had like some childhood experience with like the comics, and did you also have the toys?
So I had a buddy that had the Evel Knievel toy. So I was familiar with it.
The Evel Knievel toy was made by the same company?
Yeah, so this is kind of getting in a little bit to the weeds of it, but it's interesting in some ways. There was an Evel Knievel toy line based on the popular Daredevil of the 70s, where you could take him, put him on his bike, wind up a thing, and launch him. And then they expanded it to have like his van and other accessories that he had with him. Evel Knievel, the person, got in some legal trouble in the late 70s. Ideal had invested a lot of money in all these molds and wanted to keep the toy line going for another few years, but wanted to maybe separate it from the person, just depending on, they didn't know what was going to happen with his situation. So they went to Marvel and said, we have these molds, these launching bikes are very popular. Can you give us something that works for, red, white, and blue motorcycles, motorcycle launcher, some of these other toys that we could use. And Marvel and Ideal worked together to come up with Team America, which are the three racers, red, white, and blue in their costumes. They worked with the launcher. They rebranded the launcher with Team America. I think maybe just stickers. And then had some other toys that came along with it. In fact, there's a later part of the Team America line where Captain America, it comes along with them and can ride. You can get a Captain America motorcycle with it. So we kind of unwind a lot of what happened to the properties in some text in the back of the book. There's some text pages that kind of give you the history of the toy line and so on. But long story short, the rights to publish a comic based on the toys specifically ended up with CSN Press. And so that's where we kind of came up with the comic. We, working with Dave, I came up with new characters that kind of fit. Okay, we've got bikers wearing a red costume, blue costume, white costume, and then we have a rider in black that is affiliated in some way. So those are the things that are the same from the toy line. I kind of took it as, what if somebody gave you these toys in 2026 and said, what's their story now? And, they're updated and they don't necessarily, facially look the same. But if you got the versions with the helmets, they basically could be those people. So,
yeah. And that was a pretty common thing back in the day to like have a toy line and then kind of spawn comics and a possible like animated show like Thundercats.
Right. Yeah. Toys to comics to animation wasn't uncommon at all in the day. And a lot of times if you had a toy line, you wanted to have a comic or a show to kind of explain the lore to get the kids into it to then like, okay, I want to further this lore on my own with the toys. So that's, I think, kind of what Team America did. They provided enough lore that you had a little bit of a story to go with, why am I winding this thing up and launching this guy across the room? Well, there's a little bit of a story behind it as well.
Yeah. And originally, this was published in CSN, or Comic Shop News, which is sort of a weekly comic shop news publication.
Yeah. So Comic Shop News has been coming out since 1987. You can get it in your store each week, and it just sort of has updates about, here are some things that you could order. Here are some interviews with some creators. Here, it's basically kind of a little bit of a just a weekly small update on what's going on in the world of comics. It was probably in the early days more directly news, because weekly was about as fast as you might get updated on, like, oh, Mike Barron's going to be writing The Punisher or whatever. I've been writing for Dave, the publisher of CSN, for maybe a year or two now. And it's a little bit less of that just because of the internet and how everything works. But we do try to do more like either here's some interesting products and here's what we think about them, or here's something you might not have seen in some of the catalogs, or things like interviews where we have people talk about their books, or sometimes we have a thing called bedside reading where we'll take a creator and be like, what's on your bedside table and what books are you interested in? So some things like that kind of get you a little deeper into the world of comics that you can get at your comic shop each week. But for issue 2000, which came out last year, Dave was trying to make it a kind of a big extravaganza. Howard Chaykin had been the cover story of Comic Shop News #1 with American Flag, and he wanted some way to get Howard involved for issue 2000. We had talked about Team America a little bit, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be kind of cool to get Howard Chaykin to do the cover, do a whole new Team America comics story in issue 2000? And after talking with Dave about it a lot, he liked the idea of doing it. At first, we were maybe just going to do 4 pages or 6 pages in that issue. He decided to spread it out, do it over 5 issues, which would give us enough to do a comic book later, which is what we've done with the Full Throttle edition, which is what's coming out July 1st.
Awesome. Yeah, is this the first kind of floppy that they've put out on shelves through the Comic Shop News?
Yeah, essentially. I think there was like a Comic Shop News Guide to Comics that came out in the 80s or 90s. But as far as a publication from CSN Press, I believe this is the first one. So that's a more of a traditional comic versus a newspaper.
Yeah. Was it a hard sell at all?
To do the comic, I mean, I was always interested in, if this does well, let's put it out as a comic book. And so I think some of that is just numbers and publishing and how does that all look, which I was not necessarily privy to, but I know Dave was very interested in getting this in a place where people could put it in a bag and board and put it in their collection, you know. I mean, some people do collect the Comic Shop News newspapers, and I'm certainly glad for anybody who reads it or enjoys it. I think we do a nice job with it. Dave is the main driver on that, Dave Winning, of the publisher of CSN. But I think it's also fun to have especially if maybe you were a collector of the old stuff. Okay, now you've got a new one to put in that box. If you're a collector of sort of toys to comics memorabilia, here's a comic that goes specifically with it. So, yeah, I'm excited to have it out as a traditional comic with, covers by Chaykin and Javier Saltares from Ghost Rider. It's just kind of, to me, it's really cool to have that out there and available. So,
yeah. So this is the cover. We have a couple issues here sitting in front of us. For those who might not know, like the artist team, what other books are they kind of known for or have worked on?
So Josh has done some Star Trek for IDW. He's done some stuff for Image. He's even, I think, done some stuff for Marvel. He's been very around a lot of ways. You've probably seen his stuff with maybe not necessarily know him because he's able to just fit into these assignments so well. But he has a great style and, like I said, great with energy and motion that we thought would be really good for this one. Trying to remember all their credits off the back. I know Lorenzo's been nominated for some major awards in coloring. And so these are all guys that are, I think, really high tier, pretty high tier art team. And then when you get to guys that definitely you've heard their names before, having Howard Chaykin, who did American Flag, who did the original Star Wars comic on one of the covers, and Javier Saltares, who has been all over the place with Marvel and other companies, but probably best known for his 90s Ghost Rider. I thought the idea of having the guy who's drawn maybe the most successful guy on a motorcycle comic of all time, having him to do one of our covers was a great fit. Javier had worked with me and with Kyle Roberts before when we did the Post-Human project. He did the cover for the comic book tie-in to that. So it was exciting to reach out to him again and get him to work on this one.
Yeah. And you had in the back of this comic, you can see some of the early conceptual designs for a sort of different take on Team America Racing that feels a little bit more sort of anime.
Yeah, we had kind of talked about, do we take it more in like a webtoon anime type feel? And I think there were some positives to that, but ultimately once we clicked with Josh, we were like, let's go kind of in a more, it's not maybe sort of a more traditional, but it feels maybe closer of if you go from like the last Marvel issue to our first issue, that's less of sort of a jump than if we'd gone to a full on webtoon anime style. Which I think there's some things to be said for that. You can see kind of some of the looks we considered in the back, which I think are fun. But I like what we ended up doing as well. So I prefer what we ended up doing. Although I think there's nothing wrong with that. And if somebody's looking at those and like, you know what, we think we should totally do a anime based on Team America, then I mean, I think Dave would take your call. So.
Yeah. Well, looking at this stuff, it does remind me a lot of like Speed Racer and especially Racer X. I feel like the Highwayman kind of fulfills like this.
The Racer X.
Yeah.
A similar role as far as here's somebody connected in some way, but we don't exactly know his connection. Yeah. I mean, look, I watched a lot of Speed Racer growing up, so I'm sure some of that DNA is in there as well. And there's actually a pretty cool series for Speed Racer coming out right now that is Mad Cave. I think David Papos is doing it. So, so there's a lot of these properties have gotten revived in some way, and I think the challenge on a lot of them is how can you take what was cool about the original, but sort of filter it in a world where we're a lot sort of more critical, I think, of some of the pieces of entertainment we consume.
Yeah. What were those things in particular that you were kind of mindful of for Team America Racing? Well,
since I didn't go back and totally absorb myself in the original, I wasn't specifically trying to avoid anything, but I just know in general, like, there's stuff you could get away with probably in the 60s, 70s, 80s that's harder to get away with now as far as from a, things happening by coincidence kind of way, or I think you have to be a little more, I don't know, sometimes you have to be a little more crafty with your plotting, and hopefully that's pulled off. I mean, I'll let the reader kind of decide if that has worked or not. But yes, I think you have to maybe be a little more intentional about seeding certain things and having certain clues be there if you want to pull them up later, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Did you draw on anything from your real life, like characters wise, or?
There are definitely some. I mean, my youngest daughter was a high level gymnast. She was a 2-time AAU state champion. Just shout out Miranda. And so a lot of like kind of some of the stuff Nikki goes through in the pressures of a high level competition were kind of pulled from conversations with her in some ways. So, and then, there are just other people who I maybe interacted with less than that, but who maybe said something or had a conversation with where I'm like, that's an interesting piece. I'm going to try to pull that in. So,
yeah. You had mentioned that you went to like motocross rallies and stuff to get some inspiration.
I went to several different types of competitions. So, I did go to a few things with motor. I didn't primarily go to motorcycle things just because there weren't as many, but there's always like soccer games going on around Norman and things like that, where you can kind of get like the vibe of like, okay, what does it look like if you're at this level versus this level, and what is sort of how do parents feel about it, and just try to kind of keep an eye on what some of that looked like. So a lot of gymnastics competitions, some soccer games, things like that. I would like to have probably immersed myself even deeper in sort of that specific motorcycle culture, and maybe there'll be time to do more of that as we go on. But yeah, there just weren't as many events crisscrossing in the time that I needed to get this together where I could get it as fully immersed as I'd like to be. And I hope that I portrayed it, it's probably not accurate because it's obviously fiction, and we're trying to do some things for story reasons. But I do hope that I would love if people who are very deeply involved in that world wanted to reach out and say, hey, here are some things you might not know, or here's some things that I saw. I'd love to learn more as we go. If we do more of these, which I think is certainly a possibility. Right now it's a one-shot, but probably the more that it sells, the more Dave hears and hears about feedback. I mean, feel free to share your thoughts about what you've read and what your thoughts are about it.
Yeah. I'm curious where you would want to take the story from here.
So, not to spoil too much about what goes on, but there's a piece that gets revealed towards the end that I think would spin them into some future potential investigations. I also have 2 more characters that are just ready they could drop into the next issue, as far as how they would interact with the team and what might go there, kind of giving them two characters would kind of pull the team in a little different direction than the three existing members. So that's something that maybe I'd like to do with the next issue, is have them interact with these two new characters that would cause the team to react in different ways. We've also got the possibility, we just set up slightly, of another team may be interested in poaching one of our racers from this team. And then I did tell a Canadian retailer who was asking why should I order Team America. I'm like, if we sell well enough, and we do enough issues, I'll try to introduce Team America versus Team Canada. So just, I don't know how many issues we have to go before we get to that, but I did tell him that's a thought. Team America versus Team Canada is a possibility, which, as far as I know, they never did in the original. So there you go. There's a teaser for something that might be fun.
Yeah, that'd be really cool, because some of the other teams that they're racing are kind of like Team Green.
Yeah. Yeah, so Team Green, Dave's asking why are they Team Green? I said because they like money. So that's why they're the team. That's why they're Team Green. They're sort of the more, super. You might be like, well, wouldn't Team America be the super capitalistic team? Okay, well, in order to sort of show some separation there, Team Green is a super capitalistic team, and they're one of the main rivals with Team America in the stories that we have so far. So
yeah, I kind of like that you also with sort of like character archetypes, like with the different colors, like it feels a little Power Ranger-y with like how each character is like pretty strongly defined, I feel like, with a personality.
Their personality and their colors kind of tie in. I mean, basically what we had when we were looking at it is like, okay, you are going to design, a new red racer, a new blue racer, a new white racer, a new black racer. What does that look like? And so it's like, okay, well, I mean, you can try to lean away for it. You can try to lean into it. I tried to kind of make some of it work, although it might not be terribly on the nose. I mean, I went sort of with the analytical for red, which might not be the first thing you think about for red, but that's sort of our analytical character. And then, kind of our blue is kind of our leadership and courage, although they've all got some of that. And then Nikki, our main character, is sort of dealing with loss, which I don't know if white symbolizes that as much as black, but I wanted black to be mystery. So anyway, that's where we can kind of ended up with some of that. Because you're obviously, when you start, you're dealing with these four colors. What are you going to do? And then also that kind of helped lead to Team Green. Because like, well, what colors aren't already on the team? Green. Okay, the other team can be green.
Do you have any favorite pages out of this book?
I mean, yes, I would say a couple that I like that, I think they're all really good, but I like the Highwayman is investigating, at some point gets in a fight. I really like that fight page. I think Josh did a good job of making it feel intense. And Lorenzo, I think, brings a really interesting color scheme to that as well. We do show one of those pages in the back of that beginning of that scene where we show the pencils and then the inks and the colors on that one. I also like the lead-in page where you kind of introduce the team, show the motorcycles, show what's happening. I think the introductory page, I really like as well. So
nice. You're going to be doing some signings for the release of this book as well?
Yeah, I'll be you can catch me in Speeding Bullet pretty often, but I'll be here on July 1st and July 4th, probably around 2 to 4 p.m. signing. If you catch me another time at the shop, you're going to be signing a book, I'll most likely do that as well. And then New World Con is going to be July 11th at the Cleveland County Fairgrounds. We will have a booth there. I'll be there. Hunter Husky, artist who also is a Speeding Bullet guy, will be there. And I'll be signing there as well. Hunter will also have some prints. We're working on, I'll just say we're working on it and hopefully it comes together. Ben Soto from Halloween Head is hoping to come down for New World as well. He did the last Grave comic that we did, the Big Bad Secret issue. So we will have him there to potentially sign some of those. And we're trying, I think we're going to have it, a Ben Soto Halloween Head Team America print that you'll be able to get at New World Comic Con along with the comic. So you can have us both sign the print if you want. Again, fingers crossed. That's not all a done deal yet, but I'm hopeful enough that's going to happen. You should come by New World Comic Con, see if we have the print, get the comic, and meet Ben and Hunter and I and have us sign stuff if you'd like.
Yeah. Well, I was lucky enough to get a sneak peek of this comic, and I would tell everybody to definitely try and get a copy when it comes out.